So I have some tentative good news, y'all. It appears like the big, beautiful bill that Trump got together it's stalling in the Senate. It's stalling. At the moment, they're really on the brink in terms of being able to get the support that they need in order to get it through. You have Ron Johnson expressing opposition in an interview he did with the media, where I'm about to show you Rand Paul, who is a very clear no on this. Then you have Collins and Murkowski are a question mark. There's a few others. So it looks like at the moment, they may not have the numbers they need. Now, having said that, I don't want to speak too soon because you all know Trump is the master at twisting arms and really berating his people to fall in line and making them scared. And so maybe ultimately he does get it through. But for the meantime, they're struggling. It got through the House. By the way, the main reason it got through the House is because Democratic Congress people keep dying because they're 1,000 years old. So the gerontocracy is actually coming back to bite us in the ass. But it did get through the House by one vote. Now it goes to the Senate. Listen to what Rand Paul has to say. This guy is a Trump supporter. He's a Trump supporter, but let's watch.
The big, beautiful bill, as it's been called, is now heading to you in the Senate. The Hill says this: House GOP leaders spent weeks in delicate talks with Republican holdouts before cobbling together a fragile agreement. The critical voices of the House debate are cautioning their upper chamber counterparts not to alter their design too severely, or it will never get through the House on its return. We'll talk about some of your specific objections, but how much does that worry factor into your calculus, whether or not what you do in the Senate can get back through the House?
You know, the bigger a bill, the more it includes, the more difficult it is to get everybody to agree to things. I supported the tax cuts in 2017. I support making them permanent, so I support that part of the bill. I support spending cuts. I think the cuts currently in the bill are wimpy and anemic, but I still would support the bill, even with wimpy and anemic cuts, if they weren't going to explode the debt. The problem is the math doesn't add up. They're going to explode the debt by, the House says $4 trillion. The Senate's actually been talking about exploding the debt $5 trillion. This year in September, when our fiscal year ends, the deficit will be about $2.2 trillion. Now, people used to always say, the Republicans would say, well, that's Bidenomics, that's Biden spending levels. When March, virtually every Republican other than me, voted to continue the Biden spending levels, which are going to give us a $2.2 trillion deficit. Now, if you increase the debt ceiling $4 to $5 trillion, that means they're planning on $2 trillion this year and more than $2 trillion next year. That's just not conservative. So I've told them if they strip out the debt ceiling, I'll consider, even with the imperfections, voting for the rest of the bill. But I can't vote to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion. There's got to be someone left in Washington who thinks debt is wrong and deficits are wrong and wants to go in the other direction. The idea that we're going to explode deficits and the projections are now looking at over $3 trillion in deficits over the next 10 years, I think is just, not a serious proposal.
I have to point this out. He's on the right side of the debate for the exact wrong reason. His objection is, hey man, you guys didn't cut Medicaid enough. You guys need to cut Medicaid more than what you're cutting it. That's his position. His position is, I love the tax cuts for the rich, but I don't like how that explodes the deficit. So the way you need to make that work is to do more spending cuts. And of course, the spending cuts are for all of the things that we should be spending on, right? Like, and we'll talk about this probably tomorrow. Trump is bragging about his $1 trillion military budget, which is a 13% increase, when over 60% of the military is blatant waste, fraud, and abuse. But that they don't want to touch. But what they do want to touch is the entire social safety net. So this has cuts to Medicaid. It has cuts to Medicare. It tries to codify a lot of the cuts to science funding, for example. And so his position is, man, you guys didn't cut Medicaid anywhere near enough, so I'm not going to support this unless you cut Medicaid more. So he is correct to vote no on the bill because the bill sucks. But he's doing it because he's saying, the bill isn't bad enough. I want you to make it worse. This really reminds me of the Obama era when they were talking about the grand bargain. The idea was Obama was willing to put minor cuts to Social Security and Medicare on the table. And what happened was the Tea Party caucus at the time was like, we're not going to support that because the cuts aren't big enough. And so because of the intransigence of the far right, they ended up getting no cuts to Medicare and no cuts to Social Security because, of course, Obama didn't want to go any more than he already offered, right? So they didn't take the little win from their perspective, so they got nothing. And so in a way, I'm actually happy because Rand Paul's extremism and other people's extremism is going to make it so there's a better chance that we don't get these incredibly deep Medicaid cuts. Right? Now, having said that, it is certainly on the table for them to rework this thing and for them to potentially even make it worse and get it through. Like, there's a lot of options here that are still on the table, but the fact that this thing can't cruise through as written, for the moment, that's a temporary reprieve where everybody can exhale a little bit, because that shit truly, like that, this bill truly would be the destruction of this country.
So you know the debt ceiling is going to come sooner or later, and Republicans, many of them, and those who advocate for including the debt ceiling being raised within this measure say, take it off the table now, because otherwise you're going to have really knockdown, drag-out fights with Democrats further down the road. They're going to have more leverage when you're facing that debt ceiling. So do you cede something by taking it out of this bill and leaving it for further debates? That may be to Democrats' advantage down the road.
Well, they want to take it out of this bill because it is a walk of shame. Every time the debt ceiling raises, the people who've been voting for the spending have to walk in shame to the front of the House or the front of the Senate and say, yes, I've been voting for all these deficit spending, and now I'm willing to vote to raise the debt ceiling. But I would say the opposite. I offered an amendment 2 weeks ago to raise the debt ceiling for 3 months. That's $500 billion, believe it or not, for 3 months. And the reason I do it every 3 months and force the vote is it's a point of leverage. It's an inflection point at which we can look back at leadership and said, you promised you were going to cut spending. Oh, you promised tomorrow. You promised next week. You promised next year. But you know what? You're not doing it, so I'm not going to raise it again. So this leverage would work. If you do it for 2 years, you're right. It goes through all the elections, goes on the back burner, and the debt accumulates like it always had. This is more of the same. This is what the Democrats have always done, and this is the Republicans using the same playbook.
Okay, let's talk about things where some of your GOP colleagues there in the Senate are worried about too many cuts to specific programs. They're worried about impact on Medicaid. They're worried about SNAP. And really this idea that if you add work requirements to make it tougher to access those assistance programs, millions of people could be thrown off of health insurance. They could lose their access to food and medical coverage and insurance. So as a physician yourself, where do you stand on those arguments?
Now, by the way, there's actually a really interesting point, because there are purple state Republicans, right, who feel the opposite of Rand Paul, where Rand Paul is like, I want to see bigger cuts to Medicaid. There are purple state Republicans who are like, we're cutting Medicaid way too much, bro. Like, I can't support this because then I'm going to get slaughtered in my next election when a Democrat runs against me and they clobber me with the fact that now you got all these low-income people who can't get any health care, right? So it's hard to keep their caucus together, is becoming very, very difficult. But a lot of this is self-inflicted from the Trump regime because they've done so many unpopular things for so long that now his approval has slipped colossally, and that emboldens the purple state Republicans to, on more issues, break with Trump. You understand what I'm saying? But you have the Rand Pauls who are going, this doesn't cut enough of Medicaid. Then you have purple state Republicans who are going, man, this cuts too much. And so they're in a bit of an untenable position.
Well, see, on the one hand, you can offer people free stuff. You can say, I'll give you free health care. And people are, oh, thank you for free health care. But what you don't tell them is we're borrowing the money from China to pay for your health care. So we run a deficit, $2 trillion.
This is just a lie. This is just a lie. By the way, single-payer Medicare for all, universal health care, would save trillions of dollars. Why? Because you get rid of the unnecessary, parasitic mafia middleman who gets in between you and your doctor and takes their cut, right? You get rid of the middleman, you save money. Every study that's looked into this says the same thing. We would save money if we moved to a universal healthcare system. He just comes out and lies about it.
Leads to inflation, which leads to rising prices, which squeezes you on the other side. So the bottom line is there is no free lunch. You can offer people free stuff, but if you're borrowing money to do it, you end up punishing them with inflation. The same people that are getting the free stuff are also being punished by inflation and never seem to creep out of poverty or climb up out of poverty. So it's a bait and switch. It isn't good. But I do think the deficit is a threat to our country.
I hate the slamming of the free stuff argument. Everybody knows it's not literally free. What free means in this context is paid for by tax money. So in other words, what the American people believe is, hey, stop giving my money as corporate welfare to ExxonMobil and big multinational corporations. Stop spending $1 trillion on the military and funding endless wars. Take my tax money and do stuff with it that helps me. Stuff like giving me health care, right? And he smears that idea. Now on the deficit point, that actually gets interesting because I have a new position on this based on what's happened under the Trump regime.
So it's a bait and switch. It isn't good. But I do think the deficit is a threat to our country. I think it's the greatest threat to our national security. And so I think you can't do this. We bring in about $5 trillion in revenue, and we spend $7 trillion. That's about what we do. The $5 trillion is consumed by Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and other welfare programs.
To call that welfare is nonsense. Social Security is an earned benefit program. It's called an entitlement program because you are entitled to it because you paid into it. He's trying to smear, it's just welfare. Lowering the poverty rate among seniors from 40% to 10%, that's not just welfare. That's like if you get rid of it, your society crumbles and you'll have millions of homeless elderly people.
So the people say, well, we're taking this off the table and we're not going to touch any of those programs. Well, they're just not frankly serious.
No. They are serious. You are not serious. You are not serious because you basically don't want to have a functioning civilized government. You want to slash taxes to the bone where the government gets no money, can't do roads, can't do bridges, can't do the basics, can't have a social safety net. You're actually the unserious person.
All for the Doge cuts, and I'll vote for every one of them. But, the administration now is afraid to send them back because Republican leadership on both sides is saying, we're not sure we can pass a $9 billion cut. And so what we're really stuck with is the math doesn't work. All the great Doge stuff, all the great stuff Elon Musk has done is out there, and people are going to wake up in about 2 months and say, how come the deficit's still $2.2 trillion? Where did the savings go?
My God. First of all, the Doge stuff was a nightmare. They cut Meals on Wheels. They cut pediatric cancer research. They cut the CFPB, who are the anti-scam police who returned billions of dollars to Americans who were defrauded by big financial institutions. Here he is singing the praises. What about the deficit? People are going to wake up and go, look at this deficit. No, they're not. The idea that, you wake up in the morning and instead of thinking about, how to put food on the table or pay your bills, you're like, man, we sure do have a big national deficit, bro. We got to do that doesn't fucking happen.
We're going to be very disappointed conservatives, and I'm the one ringing the alarm saying they're not doing anything. They're not sending us a rescission package. They're not cutting spending. Somebody has to stand up and yell, the emperor has no clothes, and everybody's falling in lockstep on this. Pass the big, beautiful bill. Don't question anything. Well, conservatives do need to stand up and have their voice heard. This is a problem we've been facing for decades now, and if we don't stand up on it, I really fear the direction the country is going.
He said the emperor has no clothes. That's presumably about Trump. That part is true, but look, on the deficit, just don't cut taxes massively for the rich, and then you won't have exploding deficits and you won't be adding as much to the debt. That's pretty simple. That's pretty straightforward. Stop giving all of the money to the mega wealthy, to the billionaires, to the robber barons. That's it, right? He makes it seem like all you can do is cut spending to try to get the budget in order. But you don't even have to cut spending. You could just not cut taxes on the wealthy. Multi-trillion-dollar tax cut for the wealthy, which they don't need, right? So he totally gets that wrong. But on the broader point of the debt and the deficit, he's actually not wrong in a narrow sense. The debt and the deficit, he wouldn't agree to this, but the debt and the deficit genuinely and sincerely used to not matter. And the reason why it didn't matter is because the dollar was the world reserve currency. So there was global confidence in the dollar where we were permitted to run annual deficits and add to our national debt, and it's not a big deal because belief in the dollar was so strong. Now, all of a sudden, because of Trump and his trade war, now our annual deficit and our national debt, it's going to start to matter. Why? Because people are trying to escape from the dollar. People are trying to get off the dollar as the world reserve currency. BRICS is expanding, right? And so when confidence in the dollar falls, and we're moving towards a place where it's no longer the world reserve currency, then our annual deficits and our national debt will deeply matter because it's not the world reserve currency anymore. The confidence isn't there in it. And you can have something like inflation or hyperinflation and a massive economic downturn. But that was all a self-inflicted wound from Trump. It was all self-inflicted. The idea that you launch a trade war against your allies is fucking idiotic. And now they're all looking for the door and they don't want to work with us anymore because, of course, they don't want to work with us anymore. Nobody would want to work with you if you treat them like shit, which is what he did. And so I used to roll my eyes completely at the debt and the deficit fear-mongering. But now it's more legitimate because the world is going to turn away from the dollar and we can't continue to run these massive annual deficits and add to the national debt. We can't do it, right? But again, he gets it wrong because his thing is, well, cut our social safety net programs more. Are you fucking kidding me? That'll foment revolution. People can't afford to get punched in the face again, regular people in this country. And that's what that is. It's a massive punch in the face to low-income people and disabled people and people who need the social safety net, that little bit of help that they get. The real solution is keep funding the social safety net, don't do massive cuts there, and stop doing massive tax cuts for the rich. If anything, do the opposite. Raise taxes on the wealthy. Raise taxes on the wealthy. But either way, he's now standing in the way of this bill, which he's correct on. He's He's correct for the wrong reasons, but it's serving our purposes. In the same way Ron Johnson is doing a similar thing, and there are others who are doing a similar thing. You guys need to call your senators and tell them, you hell no on this big, beautiful bill. This thing truly destroys the country, and that's to say nothing about the other provisions that are slipped in there, like stripping the courts of their power, which is what they're doing. There are so many poison pills in this bill. It's got to die. It's got to go away. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a fact. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.